All right, guys, so I have a few things to show you here. First of all, a bipartisan gun reform package, has advanced in the Senate with 64 votes. That's definitely surprising. I mean, we know the bill is very weak, but the fact that they got anything done and successfully advanced something is kind of shocking when you consider just how, deranged and messed up the Senate is. So what I'm going to do is tell you exactly what's in this bill, but then also I'm going to give you Trump's hilarious response to the bill. So let's dive into it here. This is in Yahoo News. The Senate voted to advance bipartisan gun legislation on Tuesday with hopes of passing it prior to the July 4th recess. All 50 members of the Democratic caucus joined 14 Republicans in moving the legislation forward. The bill comes after a number of mass shootings, most notably Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas. The bipartisan Safer Communities Act falls short of more expansive proposals passed by Democrats in the House and is already facing opposition from top House Republicans. Should it become law, however, the bill would be the most sweeping gun safety legislation passed by Congress in decades. The bill's chief negotiators, Senators Chris Murphy, John Cornyn, Kyrsten Sinema, and Tom Tillis released a joint statement celebrating the agreement. Quote, "Today we finalized bipartisan common sense legislation to protect America's children, keep our schools safe, and reduce the threat of violence across our country," they said. "Our legislation will save lives and will not infringe on any law-abiding Americans' Second Amendment rights. We look forward to earning broad bipartisan support and passing our common sense legislation into law." So look, there is going to be a way to track, if this gets signed into law, there is going to be a way to more or less track how effective it was. We have about 39,000 gun deaths a year. If after this legislation, suddenly we have 35,000, then it did save some lives. Now, the logical reaction to that, though, is, well, what about those 35,000 deaths? Are we just, cool with that number of dead people? And so it's a very weak mitigation effort, but it's a mitigation effort nonetheless, and it's something that when it comes to, analyzing Congress or analyzing the Senate, any objective viewer today would say, we don't get anything done on any issue at all, so it would be a minor miracle if even a little thing got done on this issue. So, let me give you, here are some of the key provisions in the 80-page bill. First of all, funding for crisis centers and so-called red flag laws. Under the legislation, $750 million would be allotted over the next 5 years to help states implement red flag laws, which allow authorities to temporarily confiscate guns from individuals deemed a threat to themselves or others. Similar laws already exist in 19 states and the District of Columbia. The legislation allows for the implementation of these programs through mental health, drug, and veterans courts. Republicans involved in the negotiations push to make sure no one is flagged without the right to an in-person hearing, an unbiased adjudicator, the right to no opposing evidence, the right to present evidence, and the right to confront adverse witnesses, as well as a right to bring counsel to the hearing. So let me pause here for a second and say, this is a little different than just saying we've created a national red flag law. This is like, let's give money to the states to incentivize them to do their own red flag laws, and let's lay out a framework and a process that they can use. I'm a little skeptical of this approach for the simple reason that whenever the federal government makes the states do shit, oftentimes the state just doesn't do it. I mean, this is one of the things that happened with Obamacare, where they wanted to do the Medicaid expansion. It's like some states did it, some states didn't. If you really are committed to doing a red flag law, you should have just done a national red flag law. But my guess is it's all the Republicans in the negotiation said that's a non-starter. Instead, let's just throw money at the states to allow them to do it. And the other thing is, where exactly is this money going to go if some of the states don't set up red flag laws? Well, it might just go to law enforcement, which is like another way to beef up their already historically large budgets. Under this bill, every state will be able to use significant new federal dollars to be able to expand their programs to try to stop dangerous people contemplating mass murder or suicide, from being able to have access to the weapons that allow them to perpetrate that crime, Murphy said in a floor speech. They're also closing the boyfriend loophole. While spouses, co-parents, or cohabitating partners convicted of domestic violence are already banned from purchasing firearms, abusers in relationships between people who are not married and live separately are still able to purchase guns, creating the so-called boyfriend loophole. About 70 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner every month. Under the new legislation, anyone convicted of domestic violence against a former or current dating partner would be banned from purchasing a weapon. Republican negotiators pushed for a strict definition of who would qualify as a dating partner and the length of time for which they'd be unable to purchase a gun. The law also would not apply retroactively, meaning that someone would have to be convicted of domestic violence after the law went into effect before they were stripped of their right to buy a firearm. Unless someone is convicted of domestic abuse under their state laws, their gun rights will not be impacted, Cornyn said in a floor speech. Quote, those who are convicted of non-spousal misdemeanor domestic abuse, not felony, but misdemeanor domestic violence, will have an opportunity after 5 years to have their Second Amendment rights restored, but they have to have a clean record. So you can see the ways in which, they're creating basically a number of workarounds and a number of loopholes. And again, I'm sure the Republicans insisted, let's have the definitions as strict as possible so we don't infringe on anybody's Second Amendment rights. Look, if I was the emperor of this process, that would not be my approach, because the whole Republican philosophy and outlook on this stems from their interpretation of the Second Amendment, which guarantees an individual right to own a firearm. I don't think that actually exists, because they talk about a well-regulated militia in the Second Amendment. So I would flip the burden the other way. I would say, look, if you're not in a well-regulated militia, then what are we talking about here? You should have to prove to the state that you're good to buy weapons. Now, if you are, then you are, and God bless. Buy whatever weapons you want. If you're a law-abiding gun owner, that's cool. But there should be a testing process, a training process, and then after you meet those barriers, then you can have a weapon. It's like what Bill Burr said. He's like, why don't we treat guns like a pilot's license? Like, you have to take a test, you have to train, and then you pass, and then once you pass, okay, look, you can fly this plane, and then you have to upgrade the license to fly a bigger plane or whatever. It says I should think it should be the same for guns. But again, that's because my interpretation of the Second Amendment is that there is no individual right to own any weapon you want, whereas the Republicans think there is an individual right to own any weapon you want, so they want to flip the burden and make the burden on the state, where I think the burden should be on the individual. So anyway, let's continue here. Expanded background checks for younger buyers. The legislation calls for an expansion of background checks into buyers under the age of under 21 years of age, providing 3 business days for the check into their criminal and mental health history to be completed. If that background check finds something questionable in a potential buyer's record, the legislation would provide for an additional 7 business days to look into the buyer. So apparently they couldn't agree to basically make the minimum age for guns 21. So they're just expanding background checks for people age 18 to 21 who would buy weapons. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know that this provision seems kind of weak to me. And the other fear is so if you get this into law, does it take all of the wind out of the sails of gun reform advocates, and then they're in a worse place because the basic things they've been asking for an extended period of time are now totally off the table? So universal background checks, totally off the table after this gets passed. Well, that's a shame. High capacity magazine ban, totally off the table, if this gets passed. It's I don't know, man. I think that's a sort of a powerful rebuttal to this law. It's so weak, and then after you get it done, people will just say, that's it, we did everything we could do. And then the other thing is the right is going to take advantage of this because there's still going to be mass shootings after this is passed. And so then they're going to turn around and say, oh, would you look at that? You took away people's Second Amendment rights, and there's still mass shootings. So why'd you take away people's rights in the first place? So I could foresee all of this unfolding. Funding for mental health and school security. The bill provides funding for expanding access to mental health services, including making it easier for Americans on Medicaid to use telehealth services and work with community-based mental health and substance use disorder treatment providers and organizations. It would provide additional funding for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, since guns account for a majority of suicide deaths in 2020, while schools would receive funding to increase the number of staff members providing mental health services. So look, this is good. I like the idea of expanding mental health care. All I'll say is we should have free, universal mental health care as part of a Medicare for All bill. Medicare for All law, I should say. That's what we should do. We should treat mental health the exact same as physical health, and there should be clinics all around the country for it. This is obviously not even close to that, but it is something. Okay, let's see what else we got here. The bill also provides $300 million for the Stop School Violence Act for increased security at schools, although some Democrats had expressed concern about this aspect of the bill. Last week, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said she was worried about the expansion of background checks into juvenile records, arguing that previous attempts to secure schools were both ineffective and harmful. Yeah, I don't agree with this issue she has with it. oh, you don't want the background checks to include juvenile records. Why? It should. It should. Again, I think the burden should be on the individual, not the state, to show that, hey, I should be able to have a gun. And so if you're a multiple-time offender, even as a juvenile, I'm sorry, I sort of don't care. I don't think you should have a weapon. I'll go further. And some people would say this is ableist. I totally disagree with them. But if you have severe anxiety, severe depression, if you have psychological issues, okay, well, then you can't have a weapon. Oh, but Kyle, you're assuming that every person who has a psychological problem is going to be violent. No, I'm not assuming that at all. I'm not assuming that at all. But again, I don't think there is an individual right to own a weapon. I think the burden should be on you to prove you meet the highest standards to have a weapon. And so if you deal with severe psychological issues, sorry, that's one of the things that you're going to lose. It just is. So that's the other thing, is I feel like it's very easy for people to lib out on this issue or left out on this issue, where it's like they would say, like, the criteria in order to get a weapon should be a lot more lax than I think it should be. Well, no, I think if you were convicted of any sort of violent crime, if you have severe psychological issues, I mean, I could think of a laundry list of things where I'd say, sorry, you just can't have a weapon. You just can't. We're not going to risk it. Even if it's only 1% of people who have severe depression or whatever that end up doing violence, even if it's less than that, even if it's 0.05, that's still more than somebody who doesn't have those issues. So, sorry, I would absolutely have a long list of things that would prevent people from buying weapons, and I do not agree at all with AOC's thing here about, oh, but what if we go after people who have juvenile records? Good, is what I'd say to that. After the 1998 shooting at Columbine High School in Colorado, Ocasio-Cortez said, "We hired hundreds of thousands of police officers into schools, and while it didn't prevent many of the mass shootings that we've seen now, it has increased the criminalization of teens in communities like mine." All right, look, here's the thing. As part of any sort of package that will actually pass, I do think Democrats are going to have to give in on the increased school security thing. Now, oftentimes, is it ineffective? Yes. Are there going to be times where it's not ineffective? Yes. So that's an easy compromise to make if we're talking about getting other better provisions. I think the problem with this legislation is there's not much else that's solid that we can hang on to. Like, if there was a universal background check in this bill, I would immediately give them more security in schools to get a universal background check. If there was a national red flag law in this bill, I would immediately give them more school security in order to get a national red flag law. If there was a high-capacity magazine ban in this, I would immediately give them more school security to get a high-capacity magazine ban. But, it seems like it's very, very weak in general. So you can make an argument that why are we doing this trade-off if they're not doing a similar trade-off back for the left? Anyway, licensed dealers in gun trafficking. The legislation would also require more sellers to register as federally licensed firearm dealers, including anyone who sells guns to predominantly earn a profit. These sellers would, in turn, be required to run background checks on potential buyers and keep records of the sales. The bill would also impose penalties on straw purchasers who buy guns for people who can't pass a background check. Okay, so this is it. This is the legislation here. Ultimately, I think it's very weak. I definitely wish it was stronger. I would have tried everything I could have to get a universal background check in there, or a national red flag law in there, or a high-capacity magazine ban in there, or have some sort of stricter testing and training protocols. But look, at the end of the day, if this is the best we could do, and I had a gun to my head, would I vote for it? I probably would vote for it. It's sort of like the Obamacare debate from back in the day. Ultimately, I want single-payer Medicare for all. Well, if we didn't get single-payer Medicare for all, then the compromise position should have been the public option. But then if it really proved impossible to get the public option, by the way, I don't think it was. I think you definitely could have gotten a public option with a Democratic supermajority, and Obama's weakness got in the way there. But if I was in a position where I literally had no other choice but Obamacare or nothing, then yeah, I vote for Obamacare and I hold my nose while I do it because I know it's going to get millions more people health care, even though it's woefully inadequate. And I feel a similar way about this sort of reform as well. I think it's I don't think it's very good. I think it's very weak. I think maybe you'll reduce the number of gun deaths by 2,000 a year or 4,000 a year or something like that. And that's really not that much when you talk about 39,000 gun deaths a year. But there is enough meat here in a gridlocked Congress, Congress that, it's almost like you got to do what you got to do. I will say this, though. I do think that if the Democrats handled the negotiation differently, and this is what I always say about Joe Biden in regards to Manchin at Sinema, etc., but if the Democrats handled the negotiation differently, there is a chance you could have gotten enough votes for at least a national red flag law, which I think that would have been preferable to this legislation. If you said just a national red flag law or this legislation, I think just the national red flag law is preferable, and I think that would actually save more lives. So, anyway, there's your breakdown of this. Now, let's get to the fun part, which is Donald Trump's reaction to it. This is in Mediaite. Trump blasts Rhino John Cornyn for new gun bill with all caps alarm. Take your guns away. Former President Donald Trump went after Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell by claiming their support for bipartisan gun safety legislation means they're trying to take guns away from Americans. Trump made his claim on Truth Social Wednesday morning, sounding the alarm over the bill being considered in the Senate. The deal on gun control, currently being structured and pushed in the Senate by the radical left Democrats with the help of Mitch McConnell, Rhino Senator John Cornyn of Texas, and others, will go down in history as the first step in the movement to take your guns away. Trump breathlessly alleged, Republicans, be careful what you wish for. So here's the whole message. The deal on gun control currently being structured and pushed in the Senate by the radical left Democrats. I love how the R and the L in radical left are capitalized. With the help of Mitch McConnell, Rhino Senator John Cornyn of Texas, and others, will go down in history as the first step in the movement to take your guns away. Remember, or Republicans, be careful what you wish for. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was crafted in the wake of several mass shootings around the country, was backed by 14 Senate Republicans and co-sponsored by John Cornyn when the text for it was released on Tuesday. The bill offers states funding grants to enact red flag laws, enhances background checks for young gun purchasers, and it will close the so-called boyfriend loophole. McConnell's office signaled support for the bill in a statement. All right, so you guys already know what's in the bill because we just went over it. This is hilarious because obviously, they went out of their way in this piece of legislation to really not take anybody's guns away and to be as minor a reform as you can possibly get while still having maybe some impact on the number of gun deaths. And he's still, they're going to take your guns away. Rhino Republicans. Now, I want to show you here, Trump has always had a political problem that I want to share with you here. And it's the same problem that Hillary Clinton has, which is these are two people who have perpetually been on every side of almost every issue. And so now, since Trump is not in power, and he's looking for some excuse, any excuse to go after the likes of Mitch McConnell, who he doesn't like, because Mitch kind of balked at the January 6th lies and the Stop the Steal nonsense. Trump's just looking for an angle to attack these people. So now he's all like, they're going to take your guns away. These are rhinos. They're terrible people. We hate them. Meanwhile, remember when Trump was president? December 18th, 2018, Justice Department bans bump stocks, devices used in deadly Las Vegas shooting. The Trump administration is banning bump stocks, the firearm attachment that allows semi-automatic weapon to shoot almost as fast as a machine gun. The devices, also known as slide fires, came under intense scrutiny after they were used by the gunman who opened fire on a country music concert in Las Vegas last year, killing 58 people. So it's a new federal rule in 2018, announced by the Justice Department. Bump stocks will be redefined as machine guns and therefore outlawed under existing law. Trump banned bump stocks. Trump banned bump stocks after the Las Vegas massacre. So when he was in power and he saw a problem, the problem was mass shootings, he didn't want to do absolutely nothing. Now, he always talked about, I'm pro-Second Amendment, I'm pro-gun, etc., but he's like, this isn't really a restriction on people's Second Amendment rights. It's a reasonable restriction. We already have fully automatic machine guns are banned. So this is effectively just closing a loophole and banning another way to create a fully automatic machine gun. Donald Trump did this. Now he looks at a piece of mild gun reform and says, they're taking your guns away. See, this is what I'm saying. He's been on every side of almost every issue. It's just whatever's politically convenient to him at that very moment, he says it. And by the way, I also think this is ill-calculated because everybody's in favor of some kind of gun reform. If you look at the polls, they're through the fucking roof. Basically, every sort of gun reform except confiscating all guns and arming teachers is supported with a strong majority. I have more for you. Look at this. After Sandy Hook, Trump hailed Obama's call for gun control legislation. Wow. So this is what he said. He tweeted this December 17, 2012. President Obama spoke for me and every American in his remarks in Newtown, Connecticut. And Obama very clearly in that speech called for more gun reform. Donald Trump supported it in 2012 because he wasn't posturing at that moment. He was just reacting in real time to what Obama was saying after a mass shooting that massacred a bunch of children. I have more for you. February 15, 2018. So many signs that the Florida shooter was mentally disturbed, even expelled from school for bad and erratic behavior. Neighbors and classmates knew he was a big problem. Must always report such instances to authorities again and again. Wait, report such instances to authorities for what, Trump? Why would you report it to authorities? Why would you report bad and erratic behavior? That's not illegal. No crime was committed. Are you saying that this guy should have been reported to the authorities so that maybe they could have confiscated his guns so he didn't do a mass shooting? Is that what you're saying? Are you signaling support for what one might call a red flag law in this tweet? The answer is yes. Yes, you are. So again, when he was president, he saw a problem and effectively reacted to it by implying a red flag law should have been used here. So he banned bump stocks. He said he indicated support for red flag laws. And I have one more for you, I think, here. Look at this. So this is September 3rd, 2019. Look at this. Mitch McConnell vows to give gun bill a vote if Trump backs it. This is August 22nd. Just concluded a very good meeting on preventing mass shootings. Talks are ongoing with both Republicans and Democrats. We are likewise engaging with lawful gun owners, survivors, grieving family members, law enforcement, the NRA, mental health professionals, and school officials. I am hopeful Congress will engage with my team to pass meaningful legislation that will make a real difference and, most importantly, save lives. So again, look, the fact that Trump was more open to reform, even if it was minor, when he was president on the issue of guns, okay, good. I'll give him credit on that. I gave him credit anytime I thought he did something good. When he axed TPP, I thought that was good. I gave him credit. When he did the First Step Act, I thought that was good. I gave him credit. Banning the bump stocks, that was good. I'll give you credit. But now he's not in power. He's just looking for an angle to attack Mitch McConnell and the rhino Republicans who aren't sufficiently Trumpy. And now he's totally flipped on this issue, and any reform at all is, they're coming to take your guns away. He's flip-flopping like a fish fresh out of water. Mild gun reform is good. No, mild gun reform is bad, and they're going to confiscate it next. Which is it, Don? Which is it? Look, the legislation overall is very weak, but I do think gun to head, is it better than absolutely nothing? Yes. Yes, it is. And I think Donald Trump circa 2018 would have admitted that shit. But now he's just looking to stay relevant, looking to lob some bombs, looking to go after the what he thinks are traitor Republicans. And so these 14 Republicans, rhino Republicans in name only, they're going to confiscate your guns. By the way, and that part is, let's call it what it is. That part is just a flat out lie. He's lying. And it shouldn't surprise you that Donald Trump's a liar. But anyway, there you have it. That's what's in the gun reform package. That's what Trump's response to it was. And now you know.